In the quaint little town of South Park, Colorado, almost everyone has some sort of brush with death throughout the series, and Season 2 is no different. But how many deaths are there really throughout the second season of South Park? I'm Caleb with Wicked Binge.
Yeah, you're the one who always plugs up the toilet at our house.
And this is South Park Season 2, The Kill Count. Much like our first season kill count, there are a few rules that we will take into account throughout this list. Firstly, we will be counting animals and supernatural creatures. We'll also be counting each time that Kenny dies. And finally, the death needs to be on screen or implied heavily.
How would you like to come with me to a more secluded part of the mall?
So we'll be starting off with episode 1, Terrence and Philip in Not Without My Anus. The first kill in this episode is that of Dr. Jeffrey O'Dwyer.
This monster entered the home of Dr. Jeffrey O'Dwyer.
While we don't see the kill happen, this is the entire reason Terrence and Philip are in court during this in-universe film. We don't know when, how, or why he was killed, but we do know that all of the evidence seems to point to Terrence having killed him. After a lot of crazy hijinks from the two Canadians, we watch as all of Canada works together to kill Saddam Hussein and 2 of his soldiers. They come together and release a massive fart, killing the 3 of them with a stinking grave. Episode 2 is the classic Cartman's mom is still a dirty S. Now, the first death of the episode actually happens during the intro where Kenny McCormick is touched by death. We know from the season 1 episode of the same name that when someone is touched by death, they do indeed die. Meaning while we don't see the death, we know Kenny dies here. Now, while Dr. Mephisto is shot, he does survive and doesn't go on the count. We have to go later on in the episode to count our next kill. The next kill is actually a Hell's Pass patient, who dies when his wound hemorrhages and his head falls off, adding him to the count. A second, similar Hell's Pass patient is the next to die, although in a different way. Dr. Doctor made the boys honorary doctors for the day to help him. While operating on the man, Stan vomits into the man's opened wound. This can lead to many different diseases and problems, and with the power in the hospital as finicky as it currently is, he is as good as dead. The next person to die during this episode is actor Eric Roberts. As the blizzard progresses, keeping the patients and a film crew trapped, the trapped people decide to resort to cannibalism, killing and eating Eric Roberts, adding him to the count. Not long after, director Seth Green and his assistant. Much like Eric Roberts, with the blizzard still going, the rest of the people decide they still need food. They end up eating the 2 of them to satiate their hunger, much like Eric Roberts before them. The final death of this episode goes to Kenny McCormick again. In one of the most selfless acts in this series, Kenny goes out into the blizzard to reconnect the electrical circuit so they can operate on and save Mephisto. Upon grabbing both ends and finishing the circuit, Kenny gets killed by a massive electrical shock throughout his body. We mourn the death of a true king when he goes onto the list. We now move on to episode 3, Chicken Lover. We actually have to go through most of the episode before we get our first death when the titular chicken lover is killed. This happens towards the end of the episode when Bar Brady hits him hard enough in the head that he never appears in this series ever again. And honestly, this weirdo deserved it. Now, as the end credits start to roll, a congratulatory Kenny McCormick is killed. This happens when he is happy that he doesn't die during the episode and a tree falls on top of him, crushing him. Sadly, this is during the time when Kenny dies in every episode he appears in, and he doesn't get to have any close calls or deathless episodes, so you'll be seeing a lot more of him. Next, we have episode 4, Ike's Wee Wee. The first death in this episode is only on the special DVD release that include the Matt and Trey intros. While Matt and Trey are introducing the episode, Trey Parker kills an old man at a retirement home. With the old man continuing to interrupt him after giving him a warning, Trey throws a shuriken into the old man's head, killing him and adding him to the count. Later on, after the episode officially starts, Street Dog Sylvester returns from season 1 just to be killed. When Kyle makes a replica of Ike out of butcher shop bones, Sylvester attacks and steals the replica, dragging it into the road. While munching on the replica, Sylvester gets hit and killed by a massive truck, adding him to the count. The final kill of the episode is our old friend Kenny McCormick. While Kenny and the gang are walking through the graveyard towards the end of the episode, Kenny clumsily falls into an open grave. But that's not all, as the gravestone crumbles and crushes the boy inside the open grave. Moving into episode 5, Conjoined Fetus Lady. The first death is relatively early on, although it does happen prior to the show's story. Nurse Gollum's conjoined twin died long before the show, causing Nurse Gollum to have conjoined twin dyslexia. This leads to the fetus being on her face for all of her appearances, and while it can be seen as disturbing, we do need to add it to the count. But we all know Kenny McCormick is the second and final kill of this episode. When the South Park dodgeball team goes up against the Chinese dodgeball team, the Chinese are much better than the South Park team. This leads to one Chinese student throwing a dodgeball hard enough at Kenny to slam him into the wall and kill him with the impact. This even leads to the wall he slammed into cracking a bit, showing a massive show of strength and another kill on our list. We now move into one of the deadliest episodes in the season, if not the series. Episode 6, The Mexican Staring Frog of Sri Lanka. Very quickly into the episode, we can add 5 deer onto the count when during a hunting trip, Ned Garblansky uses a flamethrower to incinerate a pack of deers. This shows that Ned and Jimbo don't care about the environment or how they hunt as long as they can kill something. This is shown later when we get a scene of Jimbo and Ned reminiscing on the time they killed 10 Vietnamese soldiers in a firefight. Now, we don't know if these deaths actually canonically happened, but we do know they killed some amount of Vietnamese and we do see them on screen. Not long after, we can add another 12 Vietnamese soldiers that are killed in a very similar shooting fiasco. Once again, these could be fake deaths, but they're going on the count, even if we might regret this ruling later. This is where it becomes obvious that Ned and Jimbo are lying when we add another 6 Vietnamese soldiers. This is because Jimbo rides a majestic horse and decapitates 3 of them with a sword, and a buff Ned snaps the neck of a 4th. Ned does knock out another 2 soldiers, and while we wouldn't count them usually, Ned and Jimbo say they killed all of the soldiers, therefore we count them. We then see what seems to be 89 soldiers dead on the ground during this sequence. It's possible some of these are repeat bodies, but it's impossible to tell, so we're counting all of them. Much later on in the episode, Kenny McCormick is killed again. This happens when pandemonium breaks out within the Jesus and Pal studio and the audience riots. We get our final kill of the episode when the lying Jesus and Pal's producer is sent to hell. This is due to her telling Jimbo and the boys to lie, and when Jesus finds out, he sends her to hell as retribution. With our deadliest episode of the season so far, we get to episode 7, City on the Edge of Forever. Flashbacks. A lot of this episode features scenes we know happened or didn't happen, but we do see a decent amount of death in this episode. In fact, we see a death quite quickly into the episode when we see a dead deer at the detour Routehead. After Miss Crabtree leaves the bus and warns them of the big black scary monster, a boy in a red shirt leaves the bus scared, only to be snatched up and mauled. The monster then throws his corpse back onto the bus to scare the children on the bus.
Well, I guess nobody else will be getting off the bus.
In one of the flashbacks, we go to the episode Weight Gain 4000, when Kathy Lee Gifford and the alien inhabiting her are killed. In a fake flashback to this episode, instead of missing her as he did in the initial episode, Mr. Garrison manages to actually shoot and kill the 2 of them with a sniper round. This of course didn't happen, but we're allowing this twofer on the count because it does happen on screen. In a flashback to the episode Death, the self-titled Grim Reaper, Death itself, is killed. In the flashback, instead of Death killing Kenny, Kenny gets fed up with the Reaper and ends up killing Death rather than the other way around. This comeuppance is definitely deserved, so we have no problem adding them to the count. But he doesn't get to bask in his glory for too long because Kenny McCormick is added to the count. During a cooldown between stories, the big black scary monster uses the open top of the bus to grab Kenny from it. He scurries away and Kenny isn't seen for the rest of the episode. However, he doesn't get to rest even in death because Kenny McCormick gets a second count in this episode. This happens during another flashback where the Fonz from Happy Days appears in South Park. He ends up crushing Kenny against the wall with his motorcycle, adding him to the count once more. But Kenny isn't the only one who gets counted twice because the boy in the red shirt is added to the count once more. Much like he was initially, he rushed off the bus only to be snatched up and killed by the monster, only then to miss out on the ice cream that the Beast gives to the other kids. However, the final kill of the episode actually goes to a future mainstay character when Craig Tucker dies. Now, this is very obviously Craig, even if his scream isn't consistent with his later voice, because that is literally Craig. When the bus breaks in half, Craig falls to his death in the giant pit on the edge of the cliff, becoming the final person on our count. The 8th episode in Season 2 is a bloody massacre of an episode. Summer sucks. Near the beginning of the episode, Pitt mentions that he hates summer because he is enrolled in summer school and both of his parents are dead. We then have a flashback to when the boys were in kindergarten. While playing with the other boys, Kenny collects a firecracker and it explodes in his hand, causing his body to split apart into many pieces, the first of many deaths in his repertoire. During a sequence one can only describe as insane, Mr. Garrison adds Lamb Chop onto the count. Lamb Chop is a hand puppet on a kid's TV show that annoys Mr. Garrison, so he has a vision where he chops Lamb Chop off the woman's hand and throws them onto a grill. This causes Lamb Chop to melt and burn up. Of course, we have to add Kenny McCormick to the count once more. After South Park bans the utilization of fireworks due to injuries caused by them, the town decides to use a fireworks snake. However, they use a gigantic one that starts a burn through the town, breaking the stands on some bleachers, which collapse and crushes Kenny. With this snake going out of control and going on a destructive rampage, 5 citizens are engulfed and killed by the snake, adding these 5 unnamed people to our count. This snake goes even further when it kills Mr. Garrison's psychiatrist. Mr. Garrison is dealing with therapy in the state of New York with a psychiatrist. However, during one of their sessions, the snake bursts through the building and engulfs the psychiatrist. But the snake doesn't end there when it adds the final kill of the episode onto our count. We get an official death toll of 3,000 people from the Ashen Snake. Moving on to episode 9, which you may remember by the title, Chef's Salty Chocolate Balls. We actually get our first kill quite late into the episode, when Kenny McCormick dies. He is peacefully playing with a yo-yo outside of a cinema and is very quickly trampled to death outside. However, the final kill of the episode is when Mr. Hanky the Christmas Poo dies.
Oh boy.
When Kyle tries to stop the Hollywood people from dumping stuff in the sewer, he brings out Mr. Hanky. However, due to the hot, dry surface air, Mr. Hanky dries out and essentially dies, adding him to the count, although he comes back later. We're actually going to talk about episodes 10 through 12 in one entry. These episodes are Chickenpox, Roger Ebert should lay off the fatty foods, and Clubhouses respectively. You'll see why in a moment. Each of these episodes only has one kill to its name, the long-suffering Kenny McCormick. After a long episode about chickenpox parties, Kenny and friends are in the hospital. While laughing with his friends, Kenny succumbs to the chickenpox and flatlines, dying on the spot. Kenny dies in episode 11 while the boys are investigating the planetarium.
No! Don't go back! No!
After what they assume to be mind control or something of the sort, they test the planetarium on Kenny and it causes his brain to overload and explode, killing him again. However, Kenny isn't safe because he dies in episode 12 as well. After Kenny and Cartman build a clubhouse, it becomes filled with teens, and Randy. When a specific song comes on, the teens form a mosh pit, trampling Kenny to death, and adding him onto the count once again. Episode 13, Cow Days, is kind of an insane episode. We start off this episode count with 3 unknown civilians who are mentioned to have died by Jimbo.
3 people died at last year's running of the cows.
During the South Park event known as the Running of the Cows, it is mentioned that 3 civilians died and are added to our count. Due to pure fear and excitement, another civilian dies from this event. While trying to run from the lackadaisical cows, the man runs into a knocked-over telephone pole that pierces through him, killing him and adding him onto the count by his own hands. During the rodeo and bull riding much later on in the episode, Jack McMack is killed. He was riding one of the bulls and seemed to do well, even seemed to have fans in the stands. However, he messed with the bull and got the horns, being impaled upon the horns of the beast. Similarly, Kenny McCormick dies again. While trying to help Cartman, who hit his head and got some form of amnesia, Kenny is killed by a similar bull even though he tries to avoid it. Not long after, a total of 141 cultist cows die. These cows all worshipped a giant cow clock and were surrounded by the FBI. Instead of following orders, they all decided to commit mass suicide. Much like many cults in real life, they decided to jump off the edge of the cliff. However, the final kill of the episode goes to Tom and Mary, who were imprisoned on false charges. The two of them starved to death, and they later got picked apart by rats and mice. We can now move on to the next episode in the season, being a surprisingly tame one, episode 14, Chef Aid. The patron saint of death, Kenny McCormick, dies quite late on in the episode. This happens when music sensation Ozzy Osbourne grabs and bites off the head of Kenny, killing him like a live bat at many an Osbourne show. However, a jury member is the final kill on this episode. During Johnny Cochran's classic moments in this episode, his defense manages to literally blow the mind of one of the jury members. This obviously adds him onto the count. It would blow our minds if they didn't jump onto the count. Moving on to another classic South Park Halloween special, we have episode 15, Spooky Fish, which is actually genuinely pretty creepy. The first to go in this episode is an alien who lands in South Park. After an epic scene of it landing and preparing for whatever its mission is, Miss Crabtree rolls over the creature with the bus, crushing and killing it. We're adding 5 civilians onto the count next, because Spooky Fish, the alternate universe goldfish that Sharon gets for Stan, kills 2 people that we see. We're not sure how it kills the people, at least not currently, but we know Sharon has buried at least 5 people, implying that Spooky Fish has killed those 5. We then add Kenny McCormick and Stan's Aunt Flo. We see Spooky Fish shred Kenny into a red mist within his bowl. But we know this isn't his typical MO because the others had full corpses. Aunt Flo is subsequently killed by Spooky Fish as well, leading to the boys trying to take the fish back to the pet store. We now can add the pet shop owner to the count. This is because when the evil Stan and Kyle arrived, they let loose all the evil pets. This leads us to believe the owner is dead because we never see them again. The final kills on the count belong to 13 civilians. This happens after the pets are released. We see all 13 killed during the rampage that these beasts commit, most of which are in the background, but we do have a confident count. Next are episodes 16 through 18. Merry Christmas Charlie Manson, Gnomes, and Prehistoric Iceman. In episode 16, the only kill obviously goes to Kenny McCormick. When Cartman's family is held hostage by Charles Manson, he is surrounded by police and SWAT. However, when trying to give up to them, he sends out Kenny with a white flag only to be peppered with bullet holes. No rest for the wicked because in episode 17, the only kill is obviously Kenny McCormick. This happens when the group goes down to the caves that hold the hidden underpants gnomes. During their explanation, a cart of underwear falls off the track and crushes Kenny beneath them, much to Stan and Kyle's boredom. Mysterion himself, Kenny McCormick, also dies in episode 18. While watching The Frozen Man from a few years ago, Kenny is sucked into the conveyor belt and crushed underneath the moving floors, jumping onto the count. The final kill of the episode and the season actually goes to Steve Irwin, who was on a train that crashed into a helicopter, launching him out of a train car and into the helicopter blades, being sliced to pieces and added onto the count. And that wraps up season 2 with quite the hefty kill count, way bigger than season 1. Let's see how bloody South Park gets in the future. Let us know which of these kills were your favorite. Make sure you hit that notification bell and binge our other South Park videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.